Hello, my name is Angela Cox and I am the Mindset Mentor, and this is the Mindset Mentor Meets podcast. Now, my aim is to discover and share the secrets of success. You'll hear engaging and uplifting interviews with business leaders at the top of their game, all primed to deliver bucketfuls of value and inspiration. We'll bring practical tips, success strategies, and golden nuggets of motivation to help you unleash your absolute potential. Now, please do like, share, and leave a review if you love this podcast. It really does help others to find us. Thanks for listening, and let's jump in now and meet this week's fabulous guest. So, hello and welcome along to the podcast. It's Angela Cox, your host, and it's International Women's Day today. So I thought it would be the right thing to do to bring on a woman who, in my view, is an absolute badass. And I've been building a relationship with Clare Clough, who is the UK MD for Pret Manger, for about 6 months now. And I just think she is brilliant at what she does and a brilliant human being. So I want to just say a quick hello, first of all. Clare, welcome along to the podcast. How are you?
I'm really well. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute joy because you and I have been getting to know each other, and it's brilliant, first of all, that you've come on today because I know that you only moved house about 10 days ago. So you're still in the process of unpacking boxes. How did all of that go in a pandemic?
I think actually the pandemic proved to be useful because you actually are trapped in your house. So you can do nothing but unpack. So I'm going to say the lack of sort of ability to go out and do more fun things means that I've been a more efficient house mover. So actually maybe the pandemic works in my favour.
I love that. You can't escape the boxes that are shouting at you saying empty me. So it makes you do it. I like that a lot. And I've got so many questions for you today, particularly around your journey as a leader and also, I guess, some of the challenges that you faced as UK MD of Pret. I can imagine during the pandemic, you know, the kind of pivoting, if we're going to use that word, and the transformations must have been happening every week. So it'd be good to kind of understand a little bit more about that, but also about you as a human and just how fabulous you are. So I thought we'd start there and talk about some of the things that you're most proud of. So I'm going to ask you to share 3. And I know this is the thing that most people find difficult because we don't necessarily like to shake our own pom-poms. But if you were really thinking about the things that you're super proud of, what would be the first one?
So I love that concept of shaking your own pom-poms. I think more of us should do that more often. So despite sort of the challenge of, gosh, what would those moments been? It's been really lovely to have a think about them. So the first one, I think, for me is around going to university. Now, it's weird because you might expect me to say graduating from university, but actually the sort of more proud, exciting moment for me was when I started my course, because it was the first time in my life where I think I'd been really clear on what I wanted and the path I was going to follow. And I went to Reading University and I did a course in food technology. And back in 1998, it was that long ago, food technology wasn't a particularly well-known subject. And the school that I was at the time, there wasn't, a big sort of incentive to, yes, go off and study food technology. It was a much more sort of normal choice to choose something like, medicine or maths or whatever the right topic would be. But I just felt really passionately that I had a sort of clarity of what I wanted my sort of future career to be in. And I needed it to be something that combined sort of my love of creativity and creative thinking with my love of food. So I sort of had talked to people in sort of jobs that I thought would be interesting and found this route in. And I'd met a really inspiring lady who'd done that course at the same university, sort of 3 or 4 years ahead of me. And I thought the job that she did sounded fantastically interesting. So that was the path that I went down. And whilst I had having stayed with this preference, I had good support from the school and at home. There was just a moment for me on kind of day one of enrolling of really feeling like I was on the journey I wanted to be in. And I think that was a sort of super proud moment, because it's the first time you leave, for me, it was the first time I'd left living at home. It was such a big milestone moment, but it was also really on my terms, and that just felt really good. So that's sort of the first one that springs to mind.
And you can see that in your body language when you talk about it. You can see the pride and that kind of strength in your backbone in terms of making that decision. I'm interested to know where the inspiration came from. So you mentioned two things there. You mentioned this love of creativity and then this love of food, which at sort of 17, 18, when you're making those decisions, where were the influences coming from for those things?
Yeah, so I think I've been more of a doer than a thinker. I would say that's my preference. And that showed up when I was younger, and I would more often be in the kitchen with my grandmother or my mother doing a bit of cooking or baking than I would be, playing logic puzzles or doing jigsaw. So I was always much more of a kind of creator. And I think I also knew that for me, there's a sort of equation of effort and reward that was quite clear. And this view of, well, if I'm going to be, in the working world, then I want to sort of feel that at the end of my working day, there's something that I can see. I need something a bit tangible that's perhaps a little bit more than just paperwork. And so that's really where that inspiration came, when I started to think about, well, how am I going to bring those things that put a smile on my face in how I spend my spare time, but also start to build this sense of what satisfaction would look like for me in a sort of working world. So that was sort of the inspiration. And then I was lucky enough to do some work experience with Marks and Spencer's just, in my sort of 2 weeks from school. And I discovered that there were these roles within their food division that sort of started to combine these things, where you're actually, the reward you got was to see a product that you'd been involved in, bringing to the customer on a shelf, which was hugely tangible, but also had that kind of, foodie nature, and you could really sort of, cooking on a big scale, no more baking in the kitchen, but really starting to think about what bringing products to customers like. So I think I was just really lucky at that time to sort of start meeting some people in jobs that I didn't know existed that sort of sparked my interest.
It's that kind of synchronicity, isn't it? But it's really interesting, based on the fact that we're on International Women's Day, that you use that term lucky, because that's a term that many of us as women use to describe where we are and how we've got there, as opposed to that kind of owning it and I've made it happen that we might see our male counterparts do. So this idea that, you've got there through luck, some of that is because you've got a hugely strategic mind as well. And, you're able to join the dots and see how you can bring things together in a way that's going to be right for you, and then indeed for the customer as well. So we'll just give you that kind of shake your pom-poms moment on top. And then in terms of the second one, what would the second one be?
So the second one would actually be when I was appointed UKMD, which is coming up for a year and a half ago. So that for me is an amazing sort of achievement. And I would have, if we hadn't have just had this couple of minutes that we've had, probably said I was lucky. But actually I wasn't. I really wasn't. I'd worked extremely hard. So I'm going to own that one. So I think, I joined Pret just over 10 years ago. I joined in sort of product roles, in that traditional space that I've been in all my career. Enjoyed it, fantastic 8 years in sort of product and commercial roles, became a member of the leadership team. That started exposing me to much more kind of wider business knowledge, really starting to understand the business. And then an opportunity came up when we had a bit of a restructure. We had a new CEO, and that led to some internal promotions. And I felt at that time that I was really ready for the next step. So I wasn't lucky. I put myself, forward into, for consideration for the role. And I was just totally delighted to get the support of Pano, our current CEO, and Clive, our previous CEO, to take on that challenge and opportunity and step into the UKMD role and to lead the UK business within Pret, which is the largest of our markets, is an absolute privilege. For me, it was also hugely significant because I was really the first person who hadn't come from a pure operations background that had held that role previously. So I felt really proud when people sort of talked to me about, well, you've broken a bit of new ground here as well. And even, on International Women's Day, it was great to put sort of a women into that leader position. And at the time, it meant that we had 3 out of the 4 of our managing directors for Pret as females, which it was fantastic. And I think we've always been very, very lucky in Pret with sort of diversity and equality and gender equality. But, again, a real statement to say, we've got some really strong female leaders in this business and all leading significant markets.
And it's interesting hearing you talk about the fact that what's gone before has always been people who have an ops background going into those roles, which kind of feels like the natural progression. What are some of the challenges that you face when you come from the product background, which is quite specialist, I suppose, and then suddenly you find yourself in that realm of people leader as well as business leader?
So for me, the most important thing was to just get close to the people in our shops as much as I possibly could. That was probably the biggest gap, I guess, when I moved into the role, because through my role on the sort of leadership team, I'd learned a lot about the business broadly, and I understood some of those things. What I knew less of was real life in shops. And I recognised the fact that I wasn't going to be able to go back and, become a general manager for a year and graduate to be an ops manager. That wasn't what I was going to do. But what I did do is I reached out to different people in different departments and asked them to give me a pretty full-on induction, which effectively gave them permission to treat me as a new joiner and to take me through all of the pathways that we have. So we have lots of pathways that sort of are your journey through the different levels in shops, to take me through those pathways and to allow me to ask as many basic questions as I needed to. And then I also made a commitment that I would get out to every shop in the UK within the first year in role, which I almost did before COVID hit, but didn't quite get to, which gave me an opportunity to meet all of the managers, spend time with the ops managers and start getting some of those rich conversations going. So that was really fantastic. And then the sort of legacy bit that I took forward from that was the training program that had been created for me. We condensed into a 1-day program that we then delivered for everyone in the UK office-based team that were either at my direct report or the next level down, into this 1-day program that we called a kind of shops immersion program. And that was a huge, when we delivered that day, and that again was just before COVID, probably about February last year, the feedback was phenomenal. People were coming forward and saying, gosh, I wish we'd had this when we joined, and really trying to build that connection between the office business and the shops business. And I think, the benefit was that I'd seen that gap because I'd experienced it myself. I realized, really quickly what I didn't know because of having not come from that world. And I realized that for the majority of people working in our sports centres, they were more like me than the sort of smaller group of people who come up from shops into the office. So that ran then. We ran a version of it online this year for sort of people who joined since that programme. And I think I'm hopeful now that it will be a part of our kind of ongoing training programme. So that felt like a great legacy.
It's hugely powerful, that, because it's almost like eroding the them and us situation that you get when you have central functions or shared services in the centre and then kind of the operation out on the ground. And there's always a disconnect between those. So you're kind of bringing that together, but you're also demonstrating that back to the floor, leading through the eyes of the people who serve the customers to really get the feedback as what needs to change. And I know we were chatting a few weeks ago and you were talking about kind of bringing authenticity into those conversations and making them human, and just sort of what that brings as well in terms of a flavour. So can we just touch on that a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. And I think for me, authenticity has always been so important to me. And that was a lot why, before I go on to talking about the shops, just talking about creating that training program, was I wanted to create an environment for everyone in Pret to authentically being able to ask for help on stuff that they didn't know, to know that it was possible to grow your career, both on the basis of what you'd achieved to date, so how much you'd improved yourself to get that progression, but also what you still needed to learn, and to be able to do that in a really, I guess, authentically vulnerable way. But I think going into shops, that bridging of that gap of, we just simply can't know exactly what life is like for our team members in shops, especially in the past year where things have been so challenging for them. And so the only way to really learn is to listen. And I think, you need to create an environment of people being comfortable to open up and tell you exactly what it is that they're feeling. Because what I don't want to do when I go out into shops is hear this kind of version of what people think I want to hear.
The royal visit.
And you can get that a bit, but once you put in the sort of personal contact or detail or personal vulnerability or whatever it is, you get a different conversation, and that's where you really start to learn, and that's where you really get your takeaways. So I've always worked quite hard to make sure that people have met me rather than met the MD, and hopefully that means that we get that sort of higher quality conversation.
Oh, and it just makes me so excited when you talk in this way, because the thing about it is, you hear this in businesses all the time, this, connecting with people, leading with empathy, leading through coaching. And it's always a kind of a on the to-do list or a tick box exercise, but you actually do it. You actually make this stuff real, and you are able to go and share your vulnerability without feeling like that discredits your position. And then you invite that back. And it's such a rare trait that you have. And what's beautiful is I don't even think you realize it half of the time, which makes it even more authentic. So I know that for you is going to create even more waves over the next 12, 18 months and really kind of put you in the front, I suppose, in terms of your leadership style coupled with that strategic mind. It's just brilliant. So what would the third one be then?
So I think the third one really is kind of a right now moment. So I couldn't sit here as the MD of a sort of big London-based hospitality business and not feel proud to have come through what has been an enormously challenging year. So to sort of take you back to February last year, just quickly, we had our annual quarter brief, which is where you sort of share with the business, with all the shop managers at a big conference, the plans for the year ahead. And that was on February the 7th, 2020. And I themed the day Go 2020. So it was sort of, off we go. Hindsight is a wonderful thing.
Isn't it just?
I was just over 6 months into role. My team around me were really starting to form. And I thought we'd built a fantastic set of plans for 2020. And we presented them all to the managers. Great day, lots of fantastic feedback. And 4 weeks later, we were shut. So that wasn't exactly the Go 2020 that we'd hoped for. So there was a tough moment then, because you sort of have to go, okay, well, this isn't where I wanted this energy to take me. We've now got to kind of rebase and start again. But I think, I feel now that we've got to a point where I don't say go 2021. It's maybe a little bit premature for that. But I think that we're now in a position where we are genuinely coming back stronger from where we are. We've managed to look after as many of our people as we possibly could during that period. I think we've managed to keep really strong communication across the teams, and all the things that we've needed to help each other keep going through what's been a, incredibly challenging period, in and out of openings and closings, and really sitting here, now looking as we are for the UK at a bit of a roadmap of how things will change over the coming months. I think, I feel enormously proud that we've sort of got here and we're in a good position to go again. So I guess that fills me with enormous pride. I meet with my team, I see, the energy in their body language and faces, and the more and more I'm out in shops as they start to reopen, the more sort of energy I see flowing through the business. And, that feels hugely rewarding. It makes the challenges of the last year, a little less disheartening than they were. But at points like, it's never the thing that you want to do, to write an email to the shops saying that we're shutting the business.
Oh, God.
How far we've come.
And in that time, all of the changes that you've had to adapt to, the leadership that you would have had to kind of take on board to take people on that journey, how have you kept your energy up to be able to deal with that? Because it is resilience, isn't it, personified? How have you done that?
So I would say the first 6 months were pure, grit and determination. A lot of people said to me at the time, don't forget to put your oxygen mask on first. And you sort of, yes, but you don't. And I didn't. And there was a huge period of just having to keep going and drawing on your sort of your personal reserves of resilience. But that only takes you so far, and it'll be a year before, a year and a bit before this goes away. So I think actually what I've had to learn to do probably, more recently in the last 6 months, and certainly since we've started working together, is really find that balance of conserving my energy, but also putting my energy into the right places. So I think I've really learned to understand, the concept of looking after yourself to enable you to look after others, more than just a throwaway comment that people might say, just actually really put some value to that. And put some structure into my own ways of working in a working from home environment on, what time is for work, and I'm hugely committed to that, but what time is for me as well, and how do I, make sure my energy reserves keep high and recognize when I might need, a bit of something else, or a walk, or an evening off, or whatever it might be, or a phone call with friends. So for me, it's about finding balance and permission. It's giving permission. It's that sort of knowing that the overall picture is important, and that, yes, work, of course, is always, number one, and it takes up the majority of my time, but it doesn't have to be all of the time. And I am definitely better. Work Claire is definitely better when human Claire is in good shape.
I love that. When human Claire is in good shape, and my God, she is. And I guess, the other part of that is not only how do you preserve your own energy, which you've just shared, but how do you keep everybody else's energy? Because you said you can feel it and you can see it. How are you helping people to preserve that and to, keep driving?
So one of the values that I've always held dear to me is always to treat people how you would like to be treated. And I think I've pulled on that a lot during the last year, and tried to be thoughtful and sympathetic to people's circumstances or where they are. I think the thing with, the COVID challenges, we've all been through the curve at different times, at different speeds, for different reasons, actually. And so I've always tried to sort of be sensitive to where people are and what they need, but also to recognise when we need to apply pressure or expectations, and when we don't, and make some judgments around that, and try and do that in a, well, how would I want this to happen to me with my own team? And I think the other thing is, I always in my team try and encourage a real culture of openness. And that, I think, has allowed peer-to-peer support in a really positive way. So I'm not always actually involved in those conversations. A lot of the team sort of have those between themselves, which is great. They're sort of helping each other through and supporting each other, and either because they have circumstances that are similar, or they just have a particularly rich personal relationship with each other. So I think the combination of trying to be a thoughtful leader and also trying to create the open and honest environment has actually been really beneficial. I haven't been perfect, though.
None of us are perfect, are we? So I love that you say that, but also this idea that you don't have to be responsible for everyone, and that actually you can empower the different levels to, as you say, to take care of each other. That's really nice to hear. And also that you say that the times when you have to push too, because it's really easy in this type of environment to consider all of the different circumstances and to have empathy. I say it's easy, it's not, but to kind of make allowances for circumstances that people find themselves in. But there is still a balance of, you're running a business and you need to know when to push that too. So it's good to hear that you're considering both sides and not just one or the other.
Yeah, and definitely, I think, and that's where it comes down to, judgment on really choosing the times, because what I learned quite quickly is we weren't going to keep up the pace that we had to have in the first few months. That wasn't going to last. Yeah. So therefore, I had to really think about reasonable expectations and what I really needed people to do versus what some of the more nice to do things were going to be, so that we could pace ourselves appropriately. But, we also have to recognise that we are, with myself and my team as the leadership team for the UK business, we are running a business that needs us to be focused on just that. You can't pretend that's not real, but you have to be thoughtful in how you apply that pressure.
Yeah, thoughtful is the right word. And then let's talk about you again as Claire the human. So thinking about sort of lessons that you've learned along the way, and not necessarily through the pandemic, but in general, that are now serving you to be, a better human being, a stronger leader, however you want to articulate it.
I think for me, and people often ask me, you've obviously, progressed well in your career, and what's that, why is that, and what's your top tips? And I think when I really think about it, and it probably comes back to that first shake your pom-poms moment of following my own courses, I've always genuinely loved every job I've done. And I've found that being in a job that I love allows me to perform at a good level, and then always creates the next opportunity. So I've never found myself in a sort of state of anxiety of what's next. I've always totally loved and enjoyed the moment that I'm in, the job that I'm in. So that's always been a really good guide for me, that, you know, for me, there's a happiness performance equation that goes on, and that's been really successful. And I think the other thing is, you know, learning from the things that have gone not as well as the things that have gone well, certainly on the leadership journey. So we've all, as leaders, you know, got a conversation wrong, or not delivered something in the way that we ought to, or mismanaged a bit of communication. And I think you just have to, again, have an element of forgiveness, but also a learning associated. And, you know, once is okay, but, you know, do that too many times and you're really making some mistakes. So I think being okay with learning from mistakes, asking for feedback where you think, you know, there's probably something for you to learn. I just think it's really valuable. And it's that, you know, we're always on a learning journey, where whichever position you are in a business, you're still on a learning journey.
And I mean, you say that like it's a really simple thing to do. And for many of us, it isn't. When we make a mistake, it's the worst thing in the world in that moment. And, you know, maybe for even days and weeks afterwards. And we can go through this cycle of, you know, beating ourselves up and why did I do that? And, you know, this horrible kind of self-deprecation before we get to the learning and what we're going to do differently next time. So where are you on that journey? You know, does that impact you in that way?
So I'm definitely on that journey. I would say I'm much further down that than I was when we started working together, you know, 6 or 7 months ago. But I still do that. I still sometimes have that sort of plunge to a depth of despair of I'll probably need to beat myself up for a week before I come up for air. But actually, back to that sort of how do you look after yourself, you have to wonder what value that adds to you. And actually, it's detrimental, isn't it? So there is really no point in wallowing in that moment. I think it's that acceptance of you are going to make mistakes. Things are not going to go as you planned. You're not always going to share the same opinions with everybody, or there are going to be bumps in the road. And helping yourself kind of recover from those quickly is just so much better for the issue itself, but also yourself. So yes, I'm not going to say I've mastered it fully, but I would say I've really, really sort of been thinking about that, especially through the last year where it's been intense. You know, it's just not possible to, you know, behave in that way consistently and survive the experience. So, you know, a better mode of survival has kicked in.
And you just nailed it on the head when you said it's accepting that mistakes are going to happen. That kind of mapping out that the be perfect driver can't be a thing, because, you know, if you're expecting perfection all the time, you're going to be disappointed even more so when you make a mistake. But if you recognize that they're going to happen and they're going to hurt when they happen, but it's going to be okay, that it's that acceptance at the front end that makes it easier to bounce forwards when you do make a mistake. So I love that you've just kind of brought that to life. And what about adversity? Because I'm a great believer that when we face into adversity, it's, you know, horrible at the time, obviously, when we're experiencing it, but there's always things that make us stronger as a result. So if you were kind of looking at life as a whole and looking at times when you've had adversity, what are some of the things that you've gathered strength from as a result?
So I think, I mean, a really sort of big time of adversity pre-COVID was at Pret a couple of years ago when we had some incidents surrounding food allergies, and we had an inquest into the death of Natasha. And that was a really, really challenging time for me personally, but also, you know, the business as a whole. And I think, again, that sort of overall, you know, honest moment of honesty and appraisal of you know, what do we need to do as a result of what has happened, and how can we, you know, use strength to look to the future and you know, improve things. And you know, we responded to that as a business in a way that I was very proud of, in terms of rolling out ingredient labeling on all of our products, but also I was able to, you know, ultimately build a relationship with Natasha's parents and work with them to start thinking about how we might drive change across the industry and have a, be part of supporting the legacy that they're building for her. So I think it's again that mindset of, you can never go backwards, you can only ever go forwards. And so finding a way and a strength to go forward in a way that is the very best way that you can find, I think is just the only thing you can do. And that's generally what I tend to do, is tend to, try and look forwards and try and think about what lasting change can come of any adversity that you face, and do that in the most authentic way that you can.
And that's a lovely thing to apply to all aspects of life. So we could all take that and actually think about how we replicate that in our own life as well. So in terms of how you kind of see people that you surround yourself with, what would be some of the traits that you'd look for in people that work for you that kind of bolster your traits?
That's a really good question, because actually it's quite a big mix. I tend to really like to have people that are not much like me to hit my blind spots. So, a few people in my team absolutely have my back in terms of the way that their mind works differently from mine. So a real sort of power to any blind spot that I might have. And again, that's a real recognition of, I just simply, don't necessarily think like that. Like I said at the beginning, my life was never going to be one of, intense paperwork and spreadsheets. But luckily, I've got a finance director who definitely does. So there's
thank God for them.
Correct. So there's that sort of, I like to have people around me who fill my blind spots, challenge my thinking. I can be quite headstrong, so it's always good for me to have people that, challenge my thinking. And I think probably, even in my relationship with my husband, that's his role, sort of challenge my headstrong way of being. But then equally, I, like many people do, I enjoy having people around me that also are more similar to me, who can sort of be a bit more of I guess they play a bit more of a cheerleader role, with the sort of, putting in a bit of positive energy and bounce in my stride. If I have a day where I'm slightly, less up, then those are the people that I would like to sort of bring me back up to my normal levels.
Yeah. And how do you manage that yourself? So you've got people who can help boost your energy, but what are some of the things that you do to kind of stay motivated and to keep your mental health in a good place?
So I think I try and again, a lot of it comes down to this sort of creating balance. So I've set some new rules for myself, especially since we've been working at home more on, not having my work phone in the bedroom, trying to leave that in, I might be in the office space till quite late of an evening, but when I leave that behind until I kind of come down to make the coffee in the morning. And that sort of little thing that really helps. But also just recognizing on the days that you need a little bit more. I think this concept of being kind to yourself, but listening to yourself. So even if, I've tried to keep some level of exercise as part of my balance, but if I wake up and I think actually today I don't want to do that, I'm okay with that. And I just try and, put everything that's going on in my life at that moment in time into the right context and the right priorities. And hope that whilst that means I might miss a few running sessions or drink the extra glass of wine, that on balance, I'm probably more good than bad. So, forgive yourself if you didn't quite go to plan that day.
Yeah, it's almost like looking at performance over a month, isn't it? Rather than on a specific day and beating yourself up for not doing things. Yeah. Like that.
And that's what I tend to try to do with my sort of work life as well, and diary is, I'll know what needs to be done immediately and what's got a little bit more time. So I'll read all my emails every day, but I won't necessarily action them every day because I wouldn't be able to. But I know what needs to be done when, and it just, it's a long game, not a short day.
Nice. And that prioritization actually helps to give you the space for other things. Now, you are an expert when it comes to coffee. So you've just said you make coffee in the morning. We need to know, what is the best coffee in your opinion?
Well, I have to say the Pret coffee. I couldn't say anything other. And obviously now, since we've launched during COVID, that's available in multiple retailers and online. So you can have your Pret coffee in your own home. So
we buy that. It's brilliant.
Very good. Well done. Didn't even pay you to say that.
You didn't pay me that. I buy it for my husband, who likes to have that little plungy thing in the morning. How do you have the coffee though? This is what we need to know, because there's like so many options. So what is the Clare way of having coffee?
I am an oat flat white drinker. I would like to say that I have all kinds of requirements other than I think it's the trendiest one, but I think it is that I think it's just the trendiest one. So I've been drinking that since we introduced it into the Pret range probably just over a year ago, and now I buy oat milk at home to drink the same at home. So I'm an oat flat white drinker.
And I'm a coconut flat white drinker.
Ah, there you go.
It has to be decaf though. So my London office, which you've not been to yet because I've not been in London for a year, is round the corner from your Holborn shop, and the people in there are gorgeous because most days when I go in I do get free coffee because I think I'm probably one of the only people in London that actually smiles, and apparently they quite like that, so I get free coffee.
That's lovely. Well, I'm glad. I hope that continues when you return to London.
It makes my day every time, honestly. The little things are so important.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love about Pret is that we can empower our team members to do those little things.
It's gorgeous. And they are always, well, this is about Pret across the board. And I recognised this when I worked at Compass Group and we used to do kind of collaborations. The team at Pret are always kind of on the customer's side. And that's the thing, no matter, which shop you visit, you just get this sense that the people care about what they're serving and who they're serving. And it comes across. And obviously that's, part of the training that you give, but also probably part of the hiring as well, in terms of the types of people that you bring in. Yeah.
And like I said, it's a privilege to lead the UK business because it's full of people like that. And, I'm enormously proud of all of our team members in all of our shops.
And yourself, because you're the one that's creating that culture as well. And so speaking of this, then, we're going to go on to the killer question, which is, in your opinion, what do you think is the absolute secret to success?
So I've used this word a few times today, so I'm gonna stick for this. For me, authenticity is the absolute secret to success in so many avenues of life, because I think bringing your true self to work is good for you and good for any team and good for any business, but also in all your relationships. Even if I think about the relationship we've developed, being able to be authentically you just gets to a better result more quickly, whatever the situation. So for me, confidence in being yourself, it's perhaps an important message on International Women's Day, even now.
Yes.
That authenticity of being yourself, owning that yourself and being proud in that and taking that into sort of every interaction that you have. That's, for me, I think, my little secret to success.
And feeling psychologically safe to be able to do that. And I wish, it's lovely to hear you say it because, in my 20-year corporate career before doing this, I absolutely wore a mask, not a COVID one, one that really hid my true self because I felt that didn't fit the environment that I was in, which was an absolute nonsense. But actually, despite the fact I was successful, I could have been even more so had I just been who I am on the inside. And now that I do that, I have the success on a completely different level. And so to hear women now starting to have this narrative around, being my true self, being authentic, and then to actually see people like you following through on it, it's just a joy. And on a day like today, it's the key message for girls coming through and for young women and even women like us in our, well, you're only just 40, in our 40s, this idea that it is okay to be who we truly are and that we'll be accepted and we'll fit in.
Yeah, I fully agree.
And having role models like you actually at the top of organisations showing that that's okay is the key to the future, really. So I'm so glad that authenticity is your key. Love it. Oh, it's been a joy to catch up with you in this way on the podcast. So thank you for sharing, particularly in a week that must be crazy because you're only just back at work. But yeah, thank you. You've just been a joy.
Oh, thank you. As I said, it's a pleasure to be invited. So thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So have a wonderful rest of the week and we will speak again very, very soon, I'm sure.
Very good. Thank you.
I do hope that you enjoyed listening to the Mindset Mentor Meets podcast. If you did, be sure to check out the show notes to access all of those important links. For more about me, visit my website at www.mindsetmentormeets.com. angela-cox.co.uk. Now, I'd really love it if you could subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode, and do leave us a 5-star review because it really helps us to get noticed. Bye for now. I do hope that you'll tune in next week and take good care.